Welcome to Sip of Cinema, the only podcast to bring you both giggles and sniffles. I'm Alex.
I'm Andres.
And today we're going to be talking a little bit about rom-coms. 'Tis the season.
Whoa, Alex.
Whoa.
You didn't wish them a happy holiday.
Oh my gosh. Happy Valentine's Day, y'all.
There it is.
Yeah.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Yeah, we love you. We're coming at you with a big old hug and a smooch.
Mwah.
Yeah.
There it is. The season of the love, the holiday of the Cupids.
Yep.
Obviously, the genre of film that we can very easily associate with that is anything of the romance category, but also of the comedic category.
Yeah.
So what does that give you? That gives you rom-com.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of both separate genres, but when you combine them together, you can really bring some magic together or not. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and I guess the evolution of rom-coms over the course of the last few decades in particular.
Is the golden age over? Really just copying and pasting our idea for the stoner movie episode, kind of.
I think better though. I think we'll do it better.
So to go with our rom-com discussion, we have, of course, red wine.
Yes.
Specifically Pinot Noir. Can I give my Pinot Noir fun fact?
I would love to.
And this might be wrong, and if it is, don't say it in the comments, but I've been saying this for years. Did you know if you get a Pinot Noir from the US, you should always do it from Oregon, because they are in the same same line as Bordeaux, France, and they have the same soil type. So they're the only place in the US where you can get a real Pinot Noir that's like as close to a Bordeaux as possible.
So, but you could also get it from Bordeaux though.
Well, yeah. But
Well,
I was saying specifically if you're doing one from the US.
Okay. Yeah. I'm pretty sure this is California. It's what we had on hand. So let's get a little cheers. Oh,
I'm so sorry.
I can't believe you. Okay.
so
There we
sorry.
go. There we go. I can't do, that can't be a thing. That can't be a thing that you bring back.
We'll see.
Okay.
So we kind of want to touch base on what qualifies as a rom-com. So I think obviously there is the examples that come to mind immediately, the ones specifically probably mid 2000s, follow the same kind of formula,
The blueprint, if you will.
the blueprint. Judd Apatow really had an impact here.
Yeah. Hugh Grant, big name.
Bro, yeah.
A lot of Hugh Grant.
We actually have to pay him royalties for this episode.
Yeah, actually. It's really draining us, so please subscribe.
But yeah, so while doing research for this episode, we found that a lot of lists had a lot of variety for films that we didn't think qualified quite, but also kind of, at least in my case, opened my eyes to being more accepting of what does qualify. Because essentially, all a movie has to have to be a rom-com is romance and comedy.
Shocker.
Yeah, who would have thunk?
Yeah.
But an example that I saw on a lot of lists that we were kind of discussing earlier, that kind of caught us off guard by being listed, was the recent film The Worst Person in the World. Because there's just some chuckles to be had in there and some romance, but it is very sad and very dramatic as well.
Yeah. So it's more like the death of romance. I mean, there's a little bit of comedy, there's a little bit of hee-hees and ha-has, and like roughly maybe like the first 20-30 minutes, but pretty much from then on out, it is just tragedy. I was actually thinking about this, and it's more of a comedy from like the Greek perspective, where in the Divine Comedy is about hell. And so this follows like those same lines in that it's almost comedic how horrific it can be, or how horrific a person can be to someone else's love life. And
hence the title. Yeah,
did not disappoint. I didn't think it was gonna really take it there, but boy, stringing along a cancer patient is not.
Spoiler, bro.
I'm sorry, spoilers. Spoilers. Yeah, actually, okay, so I'm gonna throw this out there. We are constantly talking about movies and they're with like spoilers. So take a look in the description. We're always putting out the movies that we're going to be talking about in the description. So if you're really worried about it, take a look there. And if you haven't seen the movie, you can check it out and then watch the episode. But
We're gonna have to timestamp by that logic, bro, because they're not gonna know what to skip.
We can't timestamp on like Amazon podcast, bro.
No, yeah, that's true.
Anyways, so yes, it is a disaster, but I guess you could call it a rom-com, but that's, I would say, probably a little bit outside the boundaries that we're trying to draw today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't want to say we're limiting ourselves to the typical formula or the usual suspects as to so to speak. But I do want to address that formula,
Okay.
tropes of that
Yeah.
formula, parts of it and everything, and reflect on those parts and how they're being utilized or not utilized in rom-coms of, let's say, the last 10, 15 years.
Right. Yeah, I would say in general, the kind of line that we're trying to draw here is that while a rom-com can touch on darker or more difficult topics, the general vibe of the movie should be more lighthearted as a whole. And so if it gets too far outside of that, we're probably not going to be touching on it. On the other hand, I also saw it in lists containing like Scott Pilgrim as a rom-com movie, which again, there is romance and there is comedy, but there's also comic books and coins and fight scenes, and that's a little bit outside of
You
what
say
we're
coins?
Yeah,
Like when he blows up in the
coin. Rom-coms famously don't have coins.
That's so true. I forgot about that. But so let's kind of like touch up on some of these elements of the formula or whatever.
Yes.
So first and foremost, I think it's very typical for a lot of rom-coms to not have a lot of focus on composition of the film.
Yeah.
It's very obvious when the B crew went to shoot transition shots.
Yeah.
Where someone goes, okay, get the drone, go out and get these shots of New York because they're all in New York. And or
potentially
Seattle if you're sleepless. But and then even in the dialogue scenes, it's very put the tripod down, cut between these two.
Yeah, you got your one shots and your two shot, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, exactly. It's you don't see a lot of dollies, a lot of booms, a lot of steady cam,
and certainly not very many fleshed out side characters. Side characters pop in for a little bit of, we broke up and so you need someone to cry to get you motivated to go back out there, or to tell you that person was perfect for you, slap, get, what are you doing? Go hit him up again. Like generally you're just focused on like the main characters. There's not a real cast that's real fleshed out.
Another thing, just shoehorning in popular songs for the soundtrack.
Yes, yeah, because you've got to.
Yeah.
Especially that super upbeat song that rolls when the credits play and the big kiss happens at the end. What a banger. What a banger of a trope.
But besides the actual, I don't want them to think that we're just shitting on these movies.
No, we're not, because we actually like them. But I mean, you kind of have to poke fun. Rom-coms are, I feel like, culturally acceptable to poke fun at because they can still be good, but there's definitely a formula to them. Or is there? That's what we're going to be diving into a little bit today. So I think it'll be a lot of fun. And with that being said, Andres, do you want to take us into sort of, I guess, where you'd like to start in terms of talking about sort of the evolution of rom-coms?
Yeah. So I think the real golden age peak you can point at, like I said earlier, the early 2000s up until like 2009. We'll put the cutoff vaguely there. Yeah. And then going back to, obviously, yes, there's rom-coms in the 80s and whatnot, but like real peak, we're looking at mid 90s, early 90s maybe. Just whenever Meg Ryan was the most employed.
Yeah. That's true.
But then I don't know. I feel like that's also when we had a really huge uptake in like teen movies, coming of age movies, things like that. And those just really go hand in hand.
Yeah, they do.
Because what do teenagers do but romanticize romance?
Yeah, I would say that's also roughly the peak of when production studios were willing to shell out for $10 to $30 million movies. Like that was that weren't indie movies. These were respected studios that were pumping out movies that were in that lower production range before we started to get more Marvel that was drawing in, requiring everything to either be an indie movie or a big budget film.
Hmm.
So you saw there was definitely a lot of really bad rom-coms in this age, but there were also a
Hmm.
lot of good ones, I think, because they were just willing to try it out a little bit more. They were
Hmm.
willing to shell out a little bit of money for seeing what was out there. I mean, you're the guy that knows the industry a little bit better than me, but am I talking out of my ass right
No,
now?
I mean what you're saying is adding up absolutely. And before we dive too deep into this, once again, I want to highlight we're not trying to, harsh on these movies at all because, like I said, even with what I said about like when the golden age was and what they did, there's also rom coms that do not follow that and are out of that time frame.
Hmm.
My favorite example, I forced you to watch this recently, When Harry Met Sally. I will
Yeah,
die on the hill that this is the best rom com of all time.
yeah,
But it very much is cinema.
yes,
Um,
yes, yes, it
yeah.
is.
So this isn't like end all be all. It's always like this, and I don't want to make that confusion
Hmm.
for the listeners.
Briefly before we move on, I do want to just address that I loved When Harry Met Sally. I
As
thought
you should
it,
have.
yeah, I thought it was pretty much the quintessential, and that's the thing. Like these movies can be and certainly tend to be very formulaic, but that doesn't make them bad, right? And they can be done in a way that is still very heartwarming. It's still very attractive, and still gives you the giggles, and
Mhm.
I respect that for what it is, because not everything needs to be intense and dramatic. Sometimes you need a movie to cuddle up to, and oftentimes I need that, actually. So
Fair. No, yeah,
so
absolutely.
and so and When Harry Met Sally definitely falls into that category.
Yeah. But we keep saying we're going to talk about these tropes, so let's just talk about these
Yes,
tropes.
yes, sorry, I
Um,
got too distracted.
so some basic things that we see very often, basic plot points. We see things like friends to lovers,
Mhm.
enemies to lovers, people of the opposite sex cannot be friends.
Until
Uh,
they become lovers.
exactly. The trope of, like you said earlier, side characters that aren't very fleshed out. A lot of times, unfortunately, we see a lot of token side characters.
Definitely token side characters, whether they're the black best friend, the gay best friend, the whatever best friend that
Hmm.
that probably isn't white and straight, or even is, and then just also happens to be potentially the maybe the best friend. Their token characteristic is that they're the creative best friend, and
Hmm.
you have the main character who's this business person, and
Hmm.
they've shut themselves out to love, type of
Yeah.
thing. Also the whole Romeo and Juliet esque type of vibe, where you have people of different sort of backgrounds or circles
That
or
aren't supposed to.
ethnicities,
Yeah.
that like they shouldn't get along according to whatever cultural norms are established in the film,
Hmm.
but they find love regardless. They found love in a hopeless space,
And
you
also
know.
to kind of like touch on the token character piece. Also, during this golden age, as I've labeled it,
Hmm.
it was very whitewashed casts,
Super, yeah.
and very, cookie cutter. You have to look a certain way. You
Hmm.
have to be of a certain beauty type.
Yeah.
And I'm not just speaking of like, um, certain, because another trope that we see often is like the transformation of someone from being like what is considered ugly to, oh, they're attractive now, so we can pursue
Right.
them. But you had to be a specific type of, pretty, or
Yeah,
hunk.
thin.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
you were thin, or if you were a guy, you probably weren't even I would say hunky. You were just like slim and cut, probably. You're
You're
not
only
gonna.
hunky if you're not the protagonist, but you're the love interest.
Right, exactly,
Hmm.
exactly. You're probably the guy's gonna have shorter hair. God forbid they have sort of like a Bieber cut, unless that's a part of their glow up.
Hmm.
The guy is probably not even gonna be blonde. Like, it is really pretty strict.
Tall, dark, handsome. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly, exactly.
But so those were the tropes of then. Are they the tropes of now? Is kind of what I really want to focus in on.
Yeah.
There are definitely still films that follow those tropes, but there are things that stray from it very much. And honestly, sometimes it feels like they're really going out of their way and pushing to stray from a lot of these tropes. For example, um, back then, pretty much all of the couples or romantic interests or whatever,
Hmm.
typical straight white couple.
Yeah.
And now we have a push for films of, you know, LGBTQ couples.
Yeah.
So just recently, in 2022, we had Bros and that other one I can't remember the name, but it's got Sheldon Cooper from Big Bang Theory.
Yeah, and I haven't seen either of those, but I did see Love, Simon, which
Yeah,
falls into the same sort of category. I mean, that just came out in what I think it was 2019, so
2018. Yeah,
20
something
yeah,
like that. Yeah.
so pretty short time frame for that to be in the sort of popular canon,
Mhm.
because certainly there were LGBTQ plus movies in the rom-com variety that came out before this, but from what I could tell, at least the ones that are popular enough to be, generally worth discussing for the sake of this, they were either indie or they were foreign films, which I thought was interesting. They weren't
Mhm.
going to come from like a Columbia or a Paramount or a Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
However, I would say that there's this like whole other category of rom-com that we're not discussing, which is the black rom-coms,
Mhm.
which certainly have been happening ever since, at least from what I could tell, again, the 90s. So for instance, I watched Love and Basketball.
Yeah.
Bro, yeah, which oh dude, it's a sexy movie, I'll be honest.
You got to be at least a little sexy to be a criterion.
Yeah,
You
yeah, no,
know?
100%. It was that was a bomb movie, and the soundtrack was phenomenal when they had the sex scene, and it was like that one song. It's like,
That
you know
was
what I'm saying?
beautiful.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Yeah, I did that just for you
Yeah, thanks.
and the audience.
Uh,
Yeah, but that was great. But there's also there's like very similar tropes within the black rom-com, but there's certain differences too,
mhm.
because you almost it's weird to say this as a white person, I'll say that up front, but it's like you have to make your especially in the 90s and 2000s, if you're going to make a black rom-com, it's like you have to make it black enough, and
Exactly.
that's it just
Otherwise,
otherwise it doesn't qualify as a black rom-com,
uh,
just like the white ones have to be like white enough to a certain
mhm,
extent, like
mhm.
there's not a whole lot of merging
Yeah.
or cross-cultural sort of discussion happening.
Yeah. Production companies essentially seemed to be scared that it had to be pitched a certain way to a certain audience.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you know, what are they doing?
Yeah,
They
exactly.
have to follow the formula of the script, absolutely.
Hmm.
But then we see, like recently, I think last year, we have films like Rye Lane came out,
Yeah,
but I wouldn't say that's specifically a black rom-com. You
yeah,
know,
I agree.
it's
Yeah.
a rom-com with black characters, absolutely.
Hmm.
But it didn't feel like it was pandering to an audience.
No, Rye Lane definitely doesn't feel like the sort of pandering situation that you experience in sort of early 2000s. But when it comes to Love and Basketball, something that I find interesting is that while it is, yes, like technically sort of a black rom-com, it still holds a lot of the same tropes, right?
Mhm.
It's just maybe the content or the situation is a little bit different. But for instance, with Love and Basketball, there's still a situation where it's sort of a friends to lovers, because they grow up together and they're best friends, and then later they find out that they want to be together.
Mhm.
At the same time, the main guy doesn't see her as attractive at first because, oh no, she plays basketball and she wears shorts and she
Mhm.
like sits like this, but all of a
Mhm.
sudden if you put her in heels for the first time and she goes to a dance and wears a dress, then wow, all of a sudden she's sexy. It's like, dog, she was hot the whole time. So there's still a lot of similarities there.
Yeah, the same formula, same tropes, all that.
Absolutely.
But Rye Lane also breaks the trope of minimal thought being put into composition and visual storytelling.
Definitely.
Uh,
Definitely.
Very,
Striking.
yeah, you could say kind of has the vibe of borrowing from the book of Edgar Wright. But I feel like I say that too often. So
Tell me more. Tell me more about that.
when I think Edgar Wright, I think visual cues,
Yeah.
choreographed shots, things of that nature. Very, you've seen Scott Pilgrim,
Yes,
you've seen Shaun of the Dead,
I have.
you've seen Hot Fuzz.
Yep.
So
That.
yeah, that.
Yeah, fair enough.
But and also, Rye Lane does a really great job with color palettes
Mhm.
and not just looking at skyscrapers or sea line, depending
Yeah.
on what state you're in, or country, because they're in England.
Yeah.
But
I mean, it's literally like the main characters are focused on a lot of art, and that is a main focus. And
mhm.
so it's there's certainly a lot of emphasis on making the film itself look like art, just as much as there is a ton of art within the movie, so much as you can consider an entire art gallery of butts art.
Yeah, dude. I forgot about
Yeah,
that.
you can't forget
What was
about
the other
that.
one? Teeth.
Yeah, the other one was
Yeah.
teeth. It was butts, and then he was talking about doing the next one was going to be, I think it was elbows or some shit. He was like, the main joke obviously being that we know less about our butts than we know about Jupiter, which is crazy.
Now, tell me if you think this is a trope or if I'm just like overreaching. Um, the whole plot line of I was dumped or got out of a relationship, I'm so miserable. Oh, look, here's this person.
Mm,
Because that also was a thing in one that I watched for this episode called What If, the one with Daniel Radcliffe and Adam
mm.
Driver.
Yeah,
Um,
and I didn't get to that one, so I wasn't able to review it. But
mhm.
I mean, I love the actors, so I was really
Oh,
interested.
dude, Adam Driver's hilarious in this
Yeah.
thing.
Okay.
But
Cool.
have you
Cool.
ever seen
Cool.
that clip where it's like, oh, where he's like, "I just had sex and I'm about to eat nachos" or whatever? Nope.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. Sure.
That was really embarrassing.
No, I think you should do it again with a little more
No,
conviction.
I'm good.
Okay.
But yeah, I would say I think Rye Lane is a better film, and more kind of put together.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's also something that's done a lot. Uh, and then also something I kind of want to touch up on because when I made the comment of Rye Lane being in England, made me think of Love Actually, which made
Mm.
me think of that other kind of subgenre where it's like multiple stories in one and it all ties into one big story.
Yeah. Crazy Stupid Love.
Or like New Year's Eve,
Yeah.
Valentine's Day. When you remember when those were a thing?
Yeah, dude. Where
Um,
we had to shove 20 fucking famous people, top act Taylor Swift
yeah,
and Taylor
yeah,
Lautner,
yeah,
into the
just
same movie.
yeah, but
Crazy. Definitely the multiple storylines intertwining was definitely a big trope. There's also the trope of we knew each other in childhood
mhm,
and I had a crush. You were the girl next door in childhood. I tried it, didn't work out. We try again in an adult, and all of a sudden now that I'm not 12, I'm a hot guy, and
yep,
so I can pull, or I'm the hot girl now, so I
mhm.
can pull.
Yeah, even a recent one that I watched for this episode, I think it was like 2015, is Sleeping with Other People
Mm.
with what's his name? Ted Lasso.
Yeah, Jason Sudeikis.
Yes,
Yeah.
and Allison Brie.
Yeah.
I really feel like we are very quickly proving my point as wrong that there is no formula anymore because
These all follow the same
yeah,
formula.
so
Yeah. No, okay. So like there's definitely a formula for what we colloquially know as a rom-com. That being
mhm,
said, the genre of rom-com can be applied very broadly. But there's certainly a formula for it. And if there weren't a formula for it, we wouldn't have 30 new Christmas rom-coms on Hallmark every
mhm,
fucking year,
mhm.
Like that follows the same formula and they repeat it and we as an audience have moved on, but people over the age of 70 maybe haven't. So and they just throw it on and it's, entertainment for the family, I guess. But
Mhm.
the peak of that formula was the 2000s and the late 90s. And what I think is interesting about rom-coms nowadays is that they've evolved into they still follow a similar formula, but the beats are not as consistent. So, and what I mean by that is I feel like the stories are a little bit more fluid.
Mhm.
Now, an example that counters my point is um I just watched it Plus One
Mhm.
that has Jack Quaid in it, who's the guy from The Boys.
Mhm. Oppenheimer.
Yeah, also Oppenheimer.
Dude, can
Yeah,
I tell you a fun fact?
please do.
This is gonna be me talking about me for a while.
Okay, that's fine.
But back in the day, I was in a sketch group, right?
Yeah,
I will not say the name because I don't want people watching those videos.
I'll say it.
But we used to intermingle with other sketch groups. We had like one in Canada that we talked to, and
Yeah.
we would hype each other up, post each other's videos and stuff like that. One of the sketch groups that we vaguely did that with was called Sasquatch Comedy.
Mm.
Jack Quaid was in that group. This was like 2014.
What?
So yeah,
Interesting.
fun fact. And he had already been in like Hunger Games and stuff.
That's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
You're just chilling with Jack Quaid.
Well, he doesn't know who I am.
Yeah,
But...
lanky dude.
Mhm.
But yeah, so I thought so. Plus one is sort of one of those movies where it's we're friends. We never thought of each other as romantic, but now we're in this situation where all of a sudden we have to go to 10 weddings in one summer.
Oh no.
We should be each other's plus ones, help each other out, and then we
Mhm.
get a little drunk, and then we kiss each other, and then we bang in a cemetery. And that is just like the formula, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
That's the blueprint. So that came out rather recently, and that one I would say is more classically formulaic. For that reason, I didn't necessarily find it the most interesting of the rom-coms because I feel like I'd seen it done before and better, quite frankly, in the 2000s. But there are certainly other sort of newer ones that I feel like are a little bit further outside of that formula. Or are they? Are they outside of that formula in your opinion? So for instance, like there are several that came out in the last few years that we watched recently.
I want to say that honestly, recently it feels like they're making an effort to go more to the formula.
Yeah, like with No Hard Feelings
I
or
was about
something
to
like
say
that.
No Hard Feelings or what is it called? Anyone But You.
Yeah, anyone
Uh,
I didn't which I haven't seen,
yeah,
but
me
Crazy Rich
neither.
Asians also
Yeah,
is the
absolutely.
Romeo and Juliet sort of situation.
Exactly. So it
Yeah.
kind of feels like they might be trying to center more on what worked in the past.
Mm-hmm.
They, did their thing with like more, not to say experimental rom-coms, but like films like Palm Springs,
Sure.
which I love Palm Springs.
Yeah, can we take a minute to talk about Palm Springs
Please,
because it's
dude.
cool because there is nothing particularly new about Palm Springs
Hmm.
other than I guess the combination of other tropes.
Yeah.
It's like I mean, because Groundhog Day was also a sort of a rom-com to a certain extent. It's
Yeah.
more on the comedy aspect than romance,
Mhm.
but ultimately it was love that got him out of the loop. And with Palm Springs, it's basically that, but plus Andy Samberg
And
uh
J.K. Simmons.
and J.K. Simmons. And so I don't know, I just loved Palm Springs. Maybe
Mhm.
I just thought it was genuinely actually very well written and funny.
Yeah, exactly.
Ultimately.
Whereas like a lot of the times with these rom-coms, they're not like actually like funny. Like you can like, chuckle or like, be like, "Oh, that made me feel,
Yeah. No, a lot of times when I'm watching a rom-com, it's one of those situations where I'm sitting there and they do something and I'm like,
Exactly. Yeah. Whereas with
pretty
Palm
low.
Springs, there's like actual laughter.
Genuine humor, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I don't know, man. I feel like maybe they kind of feel like they can't rely on that
Mm,
in a sense with them going back to the old formula because like I didn't see the new Sydney Sweeney one. And what's the other dude's name from Top Gun?
sure.
Yeah, he's in it too.
Yeah.
But I just from what I've heard, um I saw someone saying how the blooper reel at the end of the film has more jokes or like humor than the entire film combined.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah,
So,
and I think that's entirely fair. To a certain extent, do you think that that's because people are trying to make like rom-coms are supposed to be, I guess, very broadly welcomed,
exactly.
or
They
they're
want it
the
kind of tying in,
broadest audience
yeah, kind of tying into what we were saying earlier about they want to appeal or appease to
broad appeal. That's
yeah,
what I was looking
exactly.
for.
To like either as wide of an audience as possible or to a specific audience.
Yeah.
And that's why they went and they said, okay, who are two popular, conventionally attractive people right now? They saw Homeboy from Top Gun, who was
Yeah.
getting success.
Yeah.
And he was in another rom-com that I can't remember what it's called, where they're like personal assistants. It has Lucy Liu in it. And then they were like, well, Sydney Sweeney, Euphoria, all that stuff.
It's like, sure, why not?
Exactly.
Type of situation. Yeah.
And they just said, okay, well, let's try to recreate that Meg Ryan, Tom Hanks,
Mhm.
chemistry vibe, whatever. And I don't know.
Yeah. It didn't quite hit for you.
Well,
Yeah, I mean,
I haven't
clearly,
seen it, so I don't know.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. Was it just Mariah that saw it?
She hasn't seen it either.
She hasn't seen. Oh,
No.
okay. No, I'm tripping. I'm tripping. I'm misremembering my friend's letterbox logs.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it happens to the best of us.
Yeah.
But I don't know, man. It just feels like because with the ones that strayed from it, you feel like they weren't highly talked about.
Hmm.
I don't remember if Palm Springs was a straight to Hulu movie or not. I
Yeah, it
might be
was.
making that up. Okay.
Yeah.
Or it was at least produced by Hulu. And Rye Lane, I think
Same.
I don't remember, yeah, it being a theatrical release either.
Hmm.
Um so and those were the two recent rom-coms that really I enjoyed the most, I feel like.
Sure.
Granted, Palm Springs was like 8 years ago.
I watched Long Shot recently, and I
Mhm.
thought that it was actually a little bit fresh to a
Mhm.
certain extent. Did you see it?
No, so elaborate.
Yeah, yeah. So Seth Rogen and Charlize Theron
Oh, okay. I recognize the poster in my head. Yeah.
instantly, yeah, yeah, yeah. And so, like, call me, maybe I'm just an absolute sucker for a good Seth Rogen.
Hmm.
And also, quite frankly, ever since Fury Road, a sucker for a good Charlize Theron. But I thought it was funny. I thought it was good. It was a
Hmm.
little bit different. I guess maybe not. It was no, actually, it wasn't. They
Actually, I'm
she
lying.
actually I'm lying. She was his babysitter. He got a
Mhm.
boner when he was 13, and she was 16 or whatever. He was super into her, and then years later they reconnect, and he's this super fairly extreme and very vulgar journalist, and she is Secretary of State trying to become president, and they're like it's both the friends to lovers and the childhood to adult and the you're from a different world and she's from the political world, and like y'all
Mhm.
could never actually come out because
Mhm.
the public opinion would not favor you.
Mhm.
So I'm lying, it is a combination of all three tropes. But
We keep doing
we
that.
keep doing
Yeah.
that. We keep doing that. And, like, the closer you look at it, the more you realize that it really is very formulaic. There's like a handful, a fishbowl that you pick from, and those are the tropes that you find. Regardless, I thought Long Shot was really funny. Now, it
Mhm.
was not technically rated the best, and it was kind of straight to Netflix, I believe, but it cracked me up, and there were some moments where I almost teared up a little bit, which feels
Mhm.
crazy given the casting and sort
Mhm.
of the storyline. But I kind of liked it, shoot me.
Yeah, I wouldn't dare shoot you.
Thank
But I
you.
don't think we can like, point at the casting for that because well, Seth Rogen pulled at the heartstrings in Fablemans, and by that I mean he really had that affair with Steven Spielberg's mom in that movie. And
Yeah.
Charlize Theron, has very, dramatic roles.
Yeah, and, plus Longshot also had the token side character, being that Seth Rogen's best friend is, I forget his actual name, but it's Ice Cube's son.
Oh, my homeboy,
He plays Ice Cube
he's
in
in Godzilla.
NWA. Yes. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I don't remember his first
So
name.
he's
Yeah.
the token side character. It really is the same pretty much over and over again, but I think what it comes down to is how well was it written.
Hmm.
I think writing makes all the difference in rom-coms because you're going to get pretty much the same thing, and you're going to wind up with, more likely than not, the characters are going to wind up together.
Hmm.
But writing makes all the difference between the shittiest version of a rom-com that you probably are making fun of with your friends versus the one that you snuggle up to, or that is your guilty pleasure.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, they put their hand in the fishbowl, get the tropes, the whatever key points, and then what matters is what they do with those.
Yep, absolutely.
Now, have you had a chance to watch either of Cooper Raif's two feature films, so Shithouse and Cha Cha Real Smooth?
I have not. I was not able to find Shithouse. It seemed like was only available, supposed to be available on Amazon, according to what I was able to find.
I
But
think
then I
you
wasn't
have to
able to
rent
actually
it.
to find it. I wasn't actually able to find it. So
Oh,
unfortunately, no. But I know that you were really hoping that I was going to be able to watch Shithouse for this. I was not, unfortunately.
I want to be Cooper Raif's friend so bad.
Okay, well, talk to me
He's
about it.
from our area.
What do you love about it? What do you love about it?
So Shithouse, essentially, it kind of has a student film feeling,
Okay,
because
in what way?
um it's very typical student film where it's like takes place in the dorms, touches points that a lot of student films touch on because it's like what you're going through at that age.
Mm,
Essentially, the plot line of the film is Cooper Race's character is a freshman in college,
yeah.
and he's not adjusting well at all. He misses home. He's always like calling his mom and his sister. He doesn't have any
Mm,
friends there. He hates his roommate. And then the romantic interest in the film, um she is an RA for his dorm, and she just like has a problem with relationships. She has a problem with staying faithful. She has a lot of family resentment and things like that.
Mm,
And they attempt to hook up one night, and then they go off on this adventure ish kind of a few hours, come back, and then she essentially ghosts him, and
mm.
he's like in love with her because at that age you're like, "Ah, we had this great night, we met at this party, we just really got to know each other's souls,
I'm
we're
in
meant
love
to
with
be."
her. I'm in love with her.
uh
We were drunk and we
yeah
made out. Yeah.
yeah, and he like texts her a lot, they like bump into each other in person, and she's like very mean to him, and he's like, "I thought you liked me," that kind of beat.
Yeah.
And it just feels like a student film, but also feels like a feature, and also feels like a warm blanket.
Mm.
So it's a very comfort movie. Yes, it's a rom-com.
Sorry, I had to
uh
readjust my thinking. You said warm blanket, not wet blanket. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
no, 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 yeah,
Okay.
comforting,
uh,
not damp and sad.
okay. 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 Okay.
um
Good. 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 Good.
and then his that was his first feature. I might be wrong, but I think he did it his last year of film school, or he might have like left film school to make it or something like that. It was originally a student film that he did, like a shorter cut, that I also watched. I think I found it on YouTube or something, or I pirated it or something. But his second feature, Cha Cha Real Smooth,
Mm,
is with Dakota Johnson.
really?
Also, for reference, this guy is our age.
Yeah.
And
That's crazy.
I know, and he's like writing, directing, and starring in these.
Yeah. He's further
And
along
he
than
has
we are.
great
That's okay.
teeth, and he's just a charming guy, and
Yeah.
it's not
We
fair.
get it. You're in love.
I want to be his friend so bad.
Okay.
Cooper, please.
Yeah, Cooper, please. We're begging.
But yeah, he essentially in Cha Cha Real Smooth, it kind of picks up different character, but
Yeah.
picks up where the other one leaves. The other film like stops at like the end of college. This one picks up leaving college, if I'm not misremembering, and he doesn't know what he wants to do. Very The Graduate energy in that sense.
Yeah.
And he starts like working these bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs as like a party host, MC kind of deal for these kids. Parents love him. It makes them feel warm and fuzzy. And there's this one kid that's it's like always the same kids, because they're friend group from school or
Sure.
whatever. And there's one kid that's always at these, and I don't remember, I watched this movie almost 2 years ago, but she has some kind of special need. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head. And her mom is a single mom, Dakota Johnson. And he really bonds with this teenager or preteen, and makes her more comfortable, happy. They get a good relationship going, and then he falls in love with Dakota Johnson.
Wow.
So very much of the trope, we're not allowed to, it's very much him hitting on her,
Sure.
and she's like, no.
Yeah. Okay.
But
Fair enough.
but I do put them both in the rom-com category. But it's kind of like a warmer, more organic approach to it, where a lot of rom-coms are very glossy.
Yes.
Very this is Hollywood, we're making a rom-com, we're getting these actors to sell it, so people don't focus on everything else.
Yeah.
Whereas this, I wouldn't say they're crazy into the composition, and like there's nothing out of this world occurring visually in them. They look good.
Yeah.
But it just feels real.
Okay.
And I just really like that.
Yeah. Well, okay, so you're touching on something that I am not sure if we plan to talk about today, but I am kind of curious if we could just take like 3 minutes to briefly discuss it. Do we want to talk about inappropriate power dynamics or age differences in rom-coms, and how what's the word? Not fortuitous, prevalent they are in specifically the rom-com category, because that is definitely a thing. I mean, if we're gonna, we mentioned no hard feelings earlier, and that can feel kind of weird. Also, if you're talking about, to a certain extent, I guess it doesn't really matter about an RA in college, but like that is a power dynamic.
Well, that is a power dynamic.
Yeah, but that, how do you feel about how do we feel about that?
So I'm of the school of thought that it's not a movie's job to give you a moral compass, but also that shit weird.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Because like my general opinion is that you can tell a story about an inappropriate power dynamic. Sure. I mean, like you said, it's not the filmmaker's job to like make you comfortable necessarily, but you can also, it's just weird how common it is, I guess I would say.
yeah.
It's not necessarily that a filmmaker has to appeal to everybody's tastes necessarily, but if you're making a rom-com, that's the kind of the point of it, is to appeal to a lot of people's tastes.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
having different, big age differences or sort of power dynamics of, say for example, a boss versus an employee, which I guess I don't have a strict example for, but I feel like I've seen it a lot, maybe more in
Mm-hmm.
TV than movies.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird how common it is, and I guess that's kind of the extent is that I care to talk about it today.
Yeah, man, and you can even look as modern as P.T. Anderson's last movie, Licorice Pizza, where
Yeah,
main character is like 15, and um, Alana, I believe is her first name, Hain.
yeah, yeah.
She is like 25.
Yeah,
And yeah, the whole movie, she's like, "No, you're 15. Stop." But at the end of the movie, they do have a kiss.
yeah. So it doesn't. It
Why?
clearly does not stop
Yeah.
anything.
And once again, P.T. Anderson, after that movie came out, was like, "Yeah, I'm not trying to tell you that's okay. It's like it's not my job to tell you what is and isn't okay. It's just what happened with the characters." But you also kind of have to accept that people are going to run with that, how they're going to run with it, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Well, also it's just like if you're telling something that is a fictional story, it ultimately was the writer slash director slash producer's decision to make that dynamic a part of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately you could have chosen a different trope to be a reason why the girl didn't want to be with the boy or whatever, but you chose age, and it just doesn't always feel necessary, I guess I would say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Certainly you can tell the stories, and like The Graduate is a good example of that. But it doesn't, ultimately I feel like it's been covered, and it
Yeah.
does not necessarily, you're not adding anything new by adding that dynamic, and it's getting less appealing as time goes on, I say, as these movies continue to get massively produced and make a ton of money. So maybe I'm the minority, I don't know.
But that's also tying into what we've been saying this whole time about it's not adding anything new. They don't want to add anything new with
You're
rom-coms,
so
it
right.
feels like,
You're
bro.
so
They
right. I'm
don't
an
want
idiot. You're
to.
right.
No,
This is the point.
it's just like,
Yeah.
and once again, I want to say we're not trying to trash on these. I love rom-coms.
I feel like
I
we've
watch
already
them
talked
so
a lot
much.
about the things that we like,
Yeah,
the movies that
exactly.
we like.
But like, spruce it up.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm.
With that little diatribe out of the way,
Diatribe, once
I
again.
gotta throw
So-
the word diatribe in every single time. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and start talking about what we mean when we say the evolution of rom-coms,
Mhm.
and how they've kind of evolved from the golden age that we've pre-described as being roughly late 90s to 2000s to what we're seeing today.
I think one of the big evolution points is, we used to see them, a few hitting the theaters every year, whereas now we just see a higher volume of lesser quality ones going
Hmm.
straight to Netflix, straight to
Yeah.
Hulu, straight to this, that, and the other, with some outliers.
Hmm.
Um, so a lot of people will say, straight to streaming services has replaced straight to DVD or straight to TV channel or whatever, but also it's replaced the lower budget films that were still in
Especially the
theaters.
mid-budget,
Yeah,
I would say.
exactly. That is now straight to Netflix.
Hmm.
That is now straight to Amazon.
And you can kind of tell when there's almost a certain flavor of movie that you can kind of tell,
They have
even
the same
without any
look.
context. You can see a movie that is a Netflix movie. Like
Yeah.
you could see a couple of just scenes from that movie, and you could tell that it was a Netflix movie as opposed to something that came out in theaters.
Yeah,
I feel
man.
like.
It's like sometimes I'm just like, do they all have the same gaffer?
Yeah,
Do
I
they
think they
all
do.
have the same director of photography?
Yeah, I think they
Because
do.
yeah,
The
it's
lighting is the same a lot of the time. There's a certain specific humor that I feel like is kind of specific to that, and to a certain extent, we're just kind of talking about streaming versus theater movies right now, not
we will
necessarily.
always do
We will
that.
always do that, but you can feel it within the rom-coms too. And while there has been an evolution, you kind of touched on cinematography earlier. Sort of the framing of the characters, the way that light is portrayed, and sort of how that has evolved. And there's a little bit more of a focus on that over time now. One example that I can give that is counter to the evolution that I feel like stands out as a reason why we don't see certain tropes anymore is I know I talked to you before the podcast about You People and how inappropriate it was. So it's got Jonah Hill in it, and I think it generally did not get a lot of praise because it follows the trope of sort of the Romeo and Juliet trope, wherein you have two people, I guess, that are for some reason not supposed to be together, but the whole premise was, you have a Jewish family and a black family, and basically they're just competing over who's more marginalized. And it felt like they were trying to take sort of the old tropes and put it into this new formula and make it somehow woke, but instead made it way more offensive. And it had a ton of funny people in it, but it just was not actually funny. It was a massive flop. I mean, one of my lowest rated movies on Letterboxd.
Oh wow.
So the reason I mention it is because I do think that in general, there has been an evolution in rom-coms and cinematography in the way that you kind of break down the barriers of what can be, I guess, sort of an acceptable cast or couple that is the focus of the rom-com. And You People failed at acknowledging that evolution and therefore really, I think, flopped as a movie.
Yeah.
And it did go straight to streaming. And so it could have been viewed by anybody and everybody. But in general, broadly, everybody hated it.
I very distinctly remember when it came out and how quickly the conversation on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. So clearly there has to have been some evolution. Otherwise, I feel like it wouldn't have been. I mean, again, it kind of wasn't funny. So maybe that was the biggest reason why it flopped. But when you evolve with the times and with the audience, there's a certain amount in You People where I feel like they didn't actually understand how that evolution has taken place because they tried to make it more like racially focused or charged. And they tried to make it almost like a woke conversation, which I hate the term. It's been bastardized to hell, but they failed at acknowledging where the audience actually is. Oh, maybe it's just a failure as a movie in general because it didn't acknowledge where people are with that conversation. I don't know. You haven't seen it, so it's hard to.
No, I have not.
Yeah, well, you're not missing anything. But let me tell you, it's a failure as a movie, a failure as a rom-com, but certainly did not evolve the way that other movies have, like a Rye Lane or a Crazy Rich Asians or movies like that. So
yeah. Okay, well, going in the opposite direction, do you want to go ahead and, now that we've kind of covered all of our key points, talk about our favorites that we mentioned, specifically of the more modern rom-coms?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, for one, and this is not us doing our kind of like final favorite that we do right before we wrap just yet, but I did like Long Shot. I mean, it was a classic rom-com in that one of my key notes about a rom-com that I like is that any rom-com I watch, I'm going to notice the tropes and it's going to make my eyes roll a little bit. But did it make me eye roll with a grimace or did it make me eye roll with a little smirk?
Exactly.
And I feel like that's a subtle but key difference in how much I'm going to enjoy one of those movies, So it made me laugh and it gave me the smirk and it was like, whatever, but that was cute, type of thing. And so, yeah, I did like Long Shot. Now, throw out a couple of years, because I feel like you've seen a little bit more than I have of some of these more recent ones.
Of the more recent ones, I mean, I already went very in depth on the Cooper Rafe ones.
Mm-hmm.
So Shithouse and Cha Cha Real Smooth.
Mm-hmm.
There are people who kind of have a distaste to his films, I've kind of noticed.
Oh, really?
Just because they're like, look at this guy trying to do everything. This, that, and that. Why does
Yeah.
everyone like him? So people just like to
Yeah.
hate. But I definitely think everyone should check out Cooper Rafe. I think he has a TV show that he's working on right now. I don't remember the context of it or who all's in it. But besides that, of the more recent ones, like I said, Palm Springs
Yeah.
and Rye Lane.
Fair enough.
Very much so.
Now, I am curious.
Mhm.
A trope that we didn't talk about yet, but I want to know what your favorite example of it is the meet cute. What is your the meet cute? You know what I'm talking about?
No.
You've never heard of the meet cute?
The term sounds familiar, but I can't.
Yeah. So this is basically actually one of the examples in +1. Funny enough, because it wasn't one of my favorites, but they specifically talk about the meet cute in that movie. I guess trying to be a little bit meta. Was you and someone else reach for the same cereal in a grocery store.
Yeah.
Your hands touch. You kind of giggle. You're like, oh, that's crazy. You like Frosted Flakes too. That's wild. Hi, I'm blah blah blah. Or the assistant drops all of her papers across the floor, and then the big businessman leans over to help, and they have like a little smile. That is the meet cute. It's something that does not happen in real life, but it happens a lot in rom-coms. Do you have a favorite meet cute
example of that from specifically more recent ones, or just any?
Just in general. Yeah.
Oh
Oh my God.
That's hard.
Yeah, it is hard.
I
kind of put you on your toes here. I'm sorry.
I can't think of any off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of all my typical favorites, but no, I don't think I have a favorite meet cute.
You don't have a favorite?
I mean, there's like a lot of ones where like it's coincidental that they meet, like, when Harry Met Sally is like they both need to go to New York, they have one mutual connection, or Crazy Stupid Love, which we did not talk about, and I love that movie.
I love that movie. Literally just watched it this morning.
Yeah, where it's like, Ryan Gosling and Steve Carell meet at that bar, and then just happenstance.
Well, and to be clear, they're not the meet cute.
They are not the meet cute. Well, maybe.
Yeah, a little bit.
Maybe. But no, but I don't think I have one that's immediately jumping to my head.
Okay. So I don't know. I like a good meet cute. I think it's precious. I was just curious if you had a particular favorite, or if if any stood out in your mind.
Dude, I can't even think of one.
Really?
Yeah.
I feel like, I can't remember exactly what the meet cute was. I can't remember the circumstances, but I remember the proposal, and that had a good meet cute in it. That was Sandra Bullock and Ryan Reynolds in it.
Is that the one where like she's gonna get deported?
Yeah, that's the one where she's gonna get deported back to Canada. They have to, they gotta get married for the green card. She does a bonfire with Betty White where she sings "To the Window, to the Wall."
That's one. When I was saying earlier about how it's very obvious when there's like the B crew going out to get like transition footage, that is actually the specific movie I was thinking of.
That's super funny. Yeah. I'm also a fan of the proposal. And then like another one that I'm a big fan of, if we're just talking about the ones that we like, is I'm a big fan of Friends with Benefits, where Mila Kunis and Justin Timberlake, I like that way more than No Strings Attached, which had Ashton Kutcher.
That's
and
another thing
I
wanted to touch up on, how we got essentially the same movie twice in 1 year.
Literally at the exact same time. I think they overlapped in the box office in terms of release date.
I hope so.
I think they did. I'm pretty sure they did. I'm much more of a Friends with Benefits person.
I think every single person I've ever talked to about this has said the same thing. I
Really?
agree. Yeah, absolutely. No Strings Attached is just way more forgettable.
Yeah, it is. Like Ashton Kutcher, you pee in a sink, but like, what are you really offering?
Yeah, exactly. So
something about Justin Timberlake and Mila Kunis is I feel like they had genuine chemistry in Friends with Benefits. I liked their sort of, again, that was sort of another trope where it's like, can you really be friends with benefits? No, they always turn into lovers sort of situation. But yeah, it was funny. Again, that's gonna have a lot of B footage in New York because of course they're in New York.
Of course they are.
Where do
bro.
you even meet people if you're not in New York?
You don't. You
You
just,
just
don't.
you just know we're all single, even though we're engaged. But I think that's another fun one, and I actually had a decent obsession with No Strings Attached, or sorry, Friends with Benefits, for a while when I was in college. I was love that one.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah. So those are a couple of highlights. But if we didn't talk about Crazy Stupid Love too much, but that is top tier.
Peak.
There's pretty much almost every trope under the sun in that movie.
Yeah, but it has Ryan Gosling.
It has Ryan Gosling,
And that's what matters.
and he's wearing a suit when he's eating pizza, and he's in that pose, and tribal music is playing, and that's with slow zoom in. Phenomenal. Also, when he takes his shirt off in front of Emma Stone, and she's like, she's just like, "Shut up, you stupid motherfucker! What are you, photoshopped?"
Yeah.
That's also great.
What a dynamic those two
What a
have, bro,
dynamic.
over God knows how many films.
Yeah, and you know when we were talking about the miniatures, and I was like, I wish we had more Will Smith and Jeff Goldblum. I also wish we had more Ryan Gosling and Steve Carell.
Honestly, yeah, bro. They had a great dynamic.
They had a great dynamic. It was super funny because Steve Carell was like the only one who like acknowledged how hot Ryan Gosling was and was not putting up with it. He was like, I'm not taking this shit.
I will
this
not stand
is
for
absurd.
it.
Like, we get it. You're hot. You're a womanizer. You know, I'm done with it. But
all right, we need to wrap, bro.
We need to wrap.
We
do need to wrap. Yeah, it is Valentine's Day. We need to get to our women. So with that being said, right before we wrap and we kind of do our goodbyes, what is your recommendation? What is your rom-com recommendation?
Specifically newer ones.
Yeah. Let's go with specifically newer ones so you don't say When Harry Met Sally.
I'm going to say it anyways.
Okay.
I'll say specifically from newer ones, I'll say Palm Springs.
Yeah.
But I'll also say When Harry Met Sally.
Okay.
What's yours?
Yeah, I'm gonna say honestly, I'm gonna say Long Shot. It's a little bit, it's not the best example of a rom-com, but it is funny, and
that's what matters, bro.
It's like,
listen, did it enrich your life? Did you get something out of it? Did you enjoy it? That's all that matters.
And it's got Boys to Men in it.
Oh,
you know, their music, and they perform, so that's great. And it does kind of scratch that guilty pleasure sort of. Maybe it's just because I watched it recently for the first time, and so ask me again in a few years if I feel the same. I might not.
I'm setting a reminder.
Yeah. But yeah. So again, I'm a sucker for Seth Rogen. So
fair enough,
yeah,
bro.
What do you want me to do?
Nothing.
All right.
Anyways,
thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to follow us / subscribe wherever you're listening to us. We really appreciate it. And for all you lovebirds out there, have a wonderful Valentine's Day. If you don't have a day, watch one of the rom-coms we talked about. That'll be your partner for tonight. But if you do, enjoy your time. And thank you for listening. This has been Sip of Cinema.
Cheers to that.
Cheers to that.